Okay, calling to order the Harbor Plan Update Committee. It is Monday, April 14th at 1:08 p.m. And we have a quorum. So we might as well do a roll call. In no particular order. Peter?
Here.
Steve?
Here.
Emily?
Here.
Dave?
Here.
And the vice chair is here. Okay, the agenda is we are approving the minutes for 3 meetings, which Peter can explain, and then working through the rest of the draft harbor plan. And I guess Kim is not here, so Jack is running the show. It's all on you, Jack.
Jack and Allison are running the show. So it takes 2 of us to replace Kim. So do you want to approve the minutes before we
We have our
go any
chair here,
further?
so you're in charge.
You're doing a good job.
We just did a roll call and we're about to approve the agenda. And you've got it right in front of you. So we have Peter, Steve, Emily, Dave, and myself.
Oh, and Rachel just popped on.
Steve.
Oh, Rachel's here now too?
W,
Okay,
Rachel, Emily. Okay, so we moved. Is that what you're counting, 6 of us?
so we got 1, 2, 3,
No, Dave's
4,
up there.
5, 6,
Dave's up there.
7, with Rachel.
Okay. Okay, and you broke out with the staff and everybody.
I did not do anything with the staff.
Staff,
We're just,
we're just hanging out.
putting up with us.
Jack,
I'm here.
come up there.
No Kim today. Jack and Allison are running the meeting.
Okay. Okay,
Tara?
Tara. Somebody want to make a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second,
Peter made a motion. Phil seconded. All those in favor, Peter,
Aye.
Phil,
aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Rachel,
Oh, she dropped off.
okay. Emily, Hi. Dave,
Aye.
okay. All right. Approval of the minutes. Coming in fast and furious.
Okay, so, March 7th, 2023, Phil did those.
Outstanding job. I might add.
Outstanding job, I might add.
March 17th, 2025,
I was gonna say,
those weren't ready, those ones weren't ready in time for the meeting. I got them done, but they were done an hour before the meeting, so
Okay.
you guys decided you wanted them at the next meeting so people could look at them, and then March 31st.
Same thing.
I moved.
Why don't you post
Um,
it?
No, I sent these,
I know, I saw them.
yeah, sent all 3 of these.
Okay.
I sent them yesterday.
Oh, so you're talking about a different meeting that we didn't see
Hold
yet?
on,
The
back
April
up,
one we didn't see.
slow down.
Yeah.
Okay, March 23rd,
Yeah.
March 7th,
Yeah.
2023,
Yeah.
we all filled it.
Yeah.
Okay. March 17th this year,
Right,
I sent them before
Yeah.
the meeting that we were gonna look at them,
Yeah.
whenever that meeting was. But in not enough time, and so you guys said, we'll take them up at another meeting. So here we are.
okay, that's what I wasn't sure what you were saying, because we'd already seen these. Okay, somebody want to make a motion to approve March 7th, 2023, March 17th, 25, March 31st, 25.
So moved.
All right, Phil made the motion, is there?
Second.
There's people up
All
there.
right, Steve seconded. All those in favor, Peter,
Aye.
Phil,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Rachel come back? I don't see her. Okay, and I'm in favor. All right, moving on. Review the recommendations for the plan. As many as we can get. Parentheses. Go for it.
And Linda, Kim asked us if we could go over one other item, which is related to the review of the recommendations, and that is the timeline for finishing this off. I think our agreement with CZM ends around the end of August, so we wanted to kind of work back from that date and plug in a couple of, or at least get you to let us know what you feel comfortable doing. We need to finish the review of the draft, obviously, and then hold a public meeting. I think we had an earlier conversation about the best time to do that public meeting, either the end of June, the beginning of July, somewhere in that time frame. Does that make sense?
At the end of June. That's 4th of July week, beginning of 4th of July week.
Right. Would it be better to do it before or after the 4th of July in terms of people who would be available?
After.
Okay, and like, would the week after or?
Probably the middle of July. Does anybody else have any comments about that one? Phil?
I am not here the week of,
No.
the week of the 21st.
Yeah, hopefully we do it
What-
before that.
Jack, how much do we need after that public meeting
Right.
to meet
good
the
point.
CZM deadline?
Yeah, yeah. And so the public hearing, public meeting would take place. We'd integrate whatever comments you all thought were worthy of incorporating after that. You'd see a final version of it. We'd then send it off to CZM hopefully by the end of August.
Is there a public comment period after the final draft is, after we say it's final?
To go to CZM? Yeah, so you'll say the draft is final as far as you're concerned. It goes to CZM. They need to they approve it too. They may hold a public hearing as well on it. Chances are the chances of them doing that strikes me as somewhat slim because the recommendations we're talking about don't affect their jurisdiction to an extent that I think that they would be concerned about that. But they would consider holding a public hearing, yeah.
And then it
And
goes to select board after that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I
can
think if I recall correctly, the select board has to approve prior to that.
That's what I thought.
Prior to their approval. Now, that doesn't mean it can't go to CZM, but at some point in that period of time when CZM is reviewing it, the select board could review it and approve it.
The
We
middle
could
of-
figure out what that timeline would look like.
Middle of July kind of puts us close to the end.
No, should we
does.
shoot for the end of June or like the week of the 23rd or something? Back
Wow.
from the 4th of July?
We're tied up that week, but July 16th, 14th, that whole week of 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, Phil is here.
Okay. Okay, so
But
we,
Jack, excuse me, Jack, are we
Yes.
not going to have an open public meeting for comments
Oh,
on
absolutely.
us before anybody else gets involved?
yes, before anybody else gets involved, meaning who, Phil?
The select board or?
Yes,
any-
you'll have a public meeting where you'll be receiving comments from the public. We'll incorporate those comments as a final draft. You'll see that and then choose to move forward with that draft, forwarding it to the select board.
Yeah.
So
But
when-
you would approve it first, Phil. I mean, the committee would approve it, that's
Right.
the draft they want to
we wanna
submit.
hear what the general public has to say after we'd spent all this time on it.
Oh,
Right,
yeah, absolutely.
that's the public meeting in July that we're talking about.
Okay,
In other words, when we finish going through all these recommendations, we'll put it into final form for purposes of going to the public with it. They may have some further comments. If you agree that we would incorporate those comments, then we'd produce that draft, which would then be your final draft.
okay.
Okay, is everybody clear on that?
Yeah,
So
but
what-
another question, we had talked about involving
May not be.
stakeholders who may be responsible for some of the implementation.
Right.
I don't see where that's coming into the timeline at this point.
Right, that's an element that we talked about here as well. We had everybody had decided that we wouldn't send it to the responsible parties until the recommendations were in sort of final form, because why share something that we were going to change? So as soon as these are finalized, they'll be shipped to the responsible parties, which Jeff has gone through that and got that in shape. And then that'll occur simultaneously, I think, with that public hearing schedule, a public meeting schedule.
Back it up from the 16th. I want to finesse this so we can keep going.
Yep.
Back it up to like July 9th, because Peter also goes to Maine every summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so July 9th now?
Not,
That won't be here for July 9th. I mean,
You're gonna be here for the 16th?
maybe. I mean, it's whenever I can get my reservation, but it'll be probably like, like the 7th to the 15th or something like that.
So the 16th may be clear. Why don't we just tentatively schedule it for the 16th until people firm up their summer schedules more?
Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
never know what I'm going to be doing that week. I mean, I could be offshore. I could be 100 miles offshore on the 16th, depending on the weather.
Yeah,
I'll be in North Carolina, but I'll be on the screen.
okay, so I just wanna, we gotta come up with something here.
Yep.
That we can shoot for.
And
Not
Kristen, if
every-
you want to weigh in, feel free.
Sorry to join late. From what I heard, it all sounds right. I know Kim did put together a timeline. Let me see if I can find it and just make sure that that doesn't contradict anything.
What was that?
Yeah, she had suggested something around the 10th, but it doesn't matter. I mean, whatever works for you all is obviously the date that we're going to have to go with.
As Linda said, we should pick a date. Not everyone's going to be there. So as long as, a bunch of us are there, that's all that really counts.
True.
Well, let's do the 16th then and see what happens.
I think the other thing to consider as part of this conversation is that the original notice to proceed took us through August 25th. So if we're not having a public meeting until mid-July, we do need to request an extension from the state,
All right, the
which
only reason
isn't
we're
a problem.
summer is because that's when all the people are here.
Hmm.
Right.
Ooh, they're not all here. And you can't pick up anything that's near that 4th of July week. That's just brutal. So. Are we okay leaving it on the 16th at the moment?
Are we talking about June 16th or July 16th?
July. Nobody's
Okay.
here in June.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, then, so that gives us, stays the 14th of April. We would need a version of the final plan, obviously prior to July 16th, so that the public would have an opportunity to look at it prior to the meeting. And that's fine. But that means that we need to get through these recommendations. There are 5 sections, 79 recommendations left for us to review. We've done 89 so far. So whether there's enough time to do all that by meeting every 2 weeks or not is a question. So you can imagine we meet April 28th, a couple times in May, once in June, I think, because we'd have to then prepare that draft for public review. So 4 meetings. Could we get through this in 4 meetings?
I don't know, but let's get going now.
Okay. All right. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that we're looking at in order to, in other words, scheduling that public meeting affects everything that happens before it and everything that happens after it. So if we consider July 16th as a meeting date, we have a couple of months to redo this review and then us putting it in final form.
Okay,
So-
20 minutes, one issue.
Yeah.
Why?
So
is it-
that's a good way of looking at it. All right. So we left off on objective 3, recommendation 1, and that's on page 27, I think, of the plan that Allison will share with us. And a
Well,
number of,
backup. I got from Kim the other day.
Yep.
Water quality came back to me again. Why is that?
I don't know. What in water quality came back to you?
I drew a line here where we stopped on March
Which
31st.
one is it?
And it was we were starting objective 3, recommendation 1 on page 25,
Right.
not 27.
Okay,
Mhm.
mine's on 27, but again, as Kim has made edits, the pagination has
Oh, okay,
got
okay.
messed up. So 25.
You know, that could have been a, you know, whatever version, but anyhow,
Yeah, that's fine.
I got an awful lot of stuff highlighted again on these pages. That whole
She,
thing.
what Kim had done is she highlighted every recommendation that someone in the weeks before had suggested that they wanted to review. You'll see a couple of things on the right side, some comments, often with Kim's name on it, but they're comments from somebody else like Tara or Phil. And then there's some red type in the body of the text itself, which are also comments that were received by somebody from the committee, none of which have been incorporated at the moment. So we, you know, if people's names are showing up on that, or if you made that comment that's in red, you might decide that you want to address yourself to that comment. So the first one is to conduct a review of the current shellfish regulations and update as appropriate. I see that somebody asked about new dredge design being written into it, and Tara responded, conducting a dredge study in May of 2025. You know, anybody want to clarify that?
We are conducting a dredge study, and for the shellfish regulations, for right now, we're leaving the old design in, and you have to submit a letter of alteration until we make a determination on new dredge design.
Okay, and Tara, what does that affect, the fact that there's a dredge design in it?
We're looking at the impact on the eelgrass
Okay,
and the habitat.
okay. Anybody else have any comments? Okay. Recommendation 2, discuss the harvest limits on a rolling basis, requiring limits to be based on the most recent and accurate representation of shellfish populations, etc. Comment was harvest limits should be fluid and determined from data obtained during dive surveys, just like we did this year. Any thoughts there?
Well, it worked very well this time.
Okay. Anything else? Recommendation 3, develop a timeline for reviewing shellfish regulations to ensure that the regulations remain relevant to commercial and recreational shellfish activities and pressures. Harvest limits should be fluid and determined from data obtained during dive surveys, just like we did this year.
I don't know where, I'm looking at this page 25, and I don't see what you're reading.
Okay, yeah, I
Go to
think,
27 then.
don't look at the, where we're on objective. This is in commercial,
Commercial recreational fishing,
commercial
Right.
recreational
I got
fishing.
that.
And we're
Objective
on
3.
3, recommendation 2.
All right, that is nowhere near page
Well, no,
25.
the page numbers have shifted
All right,
all
now I
over
have
the
it.
place.
And it's on the screen. Allison has it on the screen.
I don't think the harvest limits should be fluid, should be in there a second time. I think it's satisfactory to have it in recommendation 2.
Okay.
I don't like that word fluid.
Better than support.
Yeah, I don't think the word fluid is right. Determined, just go right to determined.
How about adjustable?
Or
Flexible.
adjustable,
Flexible.
flexible, not fluid.
Anybody else? Anything?
Shouldn't we have something in there about, season extensions. Since we did both things this year, we both added a box to the bushel limit and we extended
And
the
we extended
season.
the season.
I,
You mentioned the possibility that we may need to do that. That would be somewhere near where we're talking about the populations.
I think the harvest limits flexible would cover it, Peter.
Okay,
Well, limits
Just,
is the.
just gives you the, you have that option every year. So I think the flexible gives you bushel limits, dates.
Well, then you need to add the season or the time limits, because that has nothing to do with the harvest limits, is how many bushels you can get. The time limit is a different issue. So if you're gonna go there, then harvest limits and time limits, or harvest and seasonal limit, whatever. But you need to add that part if you're gonna cover both of what Peter just said, and they did both this year.
But I just say to that too. The one thing that always makes me nervous about season extension and time limits, that is not a local decision. That is a decision that requires state
State
approval,
approval.
and we had to move a little heaven and earth to get them out here to review and complete their review. To get the state, they're usually, I don't know, would you say this is fairly reluctant to give extensions? So I think as much as we can focus on things that are able for the town to be the decision point on, I think is always the better choice.
yeah,
And
I agree.
the harvest limits are a town
Yeah.
Just 'cause
determination.
it's in there doesn't mean we can't try for an extension.
Yeah,
And since I've been on the board, this year's is only the second time we've done it.
Yep.
Okay.
Wait, sorry, Jack, sorry. Just to clarify, where did we land on this? Because I heard that we don't want to focus on things that the town doesn't have control over. Are we still saying to expand this, to consider expanding the season and the limit?
well, I think you gotta phrase it differently then, since it is the state, and say, I don't know, advocate for an increase in harvest limits and time frame.
Okay.
Where appropriate, advocate for it at the state. Does that make sense?
It does. Yep, that's
Mhm.
helpful. Thanks.
Mhm.
Because the way it's written, it's not really working.
Okay. Good, thanks. Recommendation 4, review and update the shellfish management plan, specifically the town should, and then there's a number of bullet points on what that would entail. Anybody want to comment on this, Tara, in particular?
Is the stuff in red going to be added to the recommendation, or is that just a comment?
It
Yeah,
was a
Brad.
comment.
I got blue.
This already happens, or it is happening. I think. Yeah, I mean. I probably wrote that in there.
Yeah.
But it is happening, each year we get a little bit closer to. Defining these metrics.
Okay, I'll see if we can reflect that.
My only question was part of it says create, one of the bullet points says create a review committee. Isn't that SHAB already?
I
We,
would say,
Yeah.
yes,
So we don't really need to create a review committee, I don't think. I mean, I think a lot of this stuff is already under SHAB's purview.
You can take it out then.
Well, you could just take out committee and just say, create a review. Or initiate a review periodically, or. And we could trust that. We trust that Tara would come to.
Yeah.
And say, we need to look at this is outdated, we need to, she came to us last year and said, we gotta. Do these things for the shellfish, for the shellfish regulations, so.
I think your language works. Initiate a periodic review
Mhm.
of.
Yeah, Yeah, she came to us when she needed or felt that changes needed to be made. And I see there's a comment there that says SHAB slow process. Well, it is a slow process, but we were able to get the things that she and Natural Resources felt important before the selectmen and got them changed. So I don't believe it's a slow process. I think it's a dynamic process that suits our needs. If she can't, my point is, if she came to us tomorrow with a whole nother idea, we would certainly review it in a timely manner and get it implemented.
Mhm. Mhm. Publication. And this recommendation really has to do with the shellfish management plan rather than the regulations.
Right, that's a good point, Jack.
So is this
s-
piece
to-
about designating a leading entity needed then? Or is SHAB the leading entity?
I think we had always talked about having a shellfish management plan review committee, especially
Okay.
for.
But when we, didn't we have or that had a member of SHAB on it, right?
Yeah,
Well, that one right behind create doesn't need to be there then. It's redundant. Develop the process for making amendments to the
We
shellfish
never-
management, and you're missing the rest of the sentence, but it's redundant compared to the one before it.
We never had an update committee is what I'm trying to say. I think we
Yeah.
tried to form one. And no one wanted to sign up for it,
Oh,
is what I remember
We had-
correctly.
2 failed attempts at creating an implementation committee
Yeah.
for the shellfish management plan.
So maybe
Yeah.
that's,
Create should be out of there then. So maybe I'd like Peter's language, initiate a periodic review. Whoever.
I think that was our department, Jeff, that took that on, and we've just been doing it
Yeah.
internally.
Yeah,
Well, we put it out for advertising twice, and no one applied, so then we just did it. That's where it is.
Okay, but get rid of the bullet point after that word, the create part, develop a process for making amendments to the shellfish man, the missing words, but it's also incorporated in the one before that.
Delete this.
But after that, it's redundant. I mean, it's just hanging there by itself.
mhm. It will tighten up that whole recommendation.
For the first part, the first bullet that Terry, you'd mentioned that this is already happened. Should this be continue to do this or regularly do it on some sort of regular basis?
I think,
The analysis of the shellfish propagation.
I think continue, you can put annually, perhaps.
What about this periodic?
Periodic's fine too,
Yeah,
pretty vague.
But then you can say if you want to do it every 6 months or every year,
This is true,
because you guys are in charge of that.
yeah.
Or you can say a minimum of once a year.
Things will just arise that will make Tara say, we need to
Yeah,
do this.
And we need to do it.
It's time and.
Yeah.
She's not gonna let us off that easy. Well,
okay, anything else in this section?
okay. Objective 4, then, the first recommendation, hire a part-time or seasonal staff, qualified intern to monitor and document fishing and shellfish harvesting through surveys at unloading areas. Somebody wrote, isn't this the job of the current warden? And then some more comments about the warden.
I mean, it is, again, I think especially in the summer. Fishing effort can be pretty spread out for what's going on from when people are coming in and out of the water. I'm not sure it's efficient to have, like. A single person try to capture that too. But. There's gotta be a better way than that collecting recreational harvest data. That gets at least a better view of what's happening. right? Because if the warden's in Mattocket and people are digging for clams in the main harbor, they're not gonna get checked. And you may not, it's always the problem, right?
That's why I think if we can promote that app for the recreational people too, then maybe they'll be compelled to report what they caught or brag on what they caught or whatever. But I think the app, this may be another application for that.
There needs to be a better way for people to voluntarily submit that data. I agree.
Mhm.
Well, and I don't mean to digress into history, but there were usually always part-time shellfish wardens, and they were usually retired fishermen. And they worked a couple days a week, primarily on the weekends, to try and capture some of this. It might be something you want to reconsider, Jeff.
Well, for sure.
How do you want to phrase this? Or is everybody okay with the way it's phrased at the moment?
I think it's fine.
Well, it gives you the option to hire part-time or seasonal staff. So yeah, and also those people could also help during the busiest time, the beginning of commercial season.
Might you want to change hire to engage part-time or seasonal staff in case Dave's idea of maybe getting some retired fishermen to do it voluntarily?
Yeah, I would get rid of the word hire.
What about some interns? Maybe make it an intern program.
Yeah.
Well, that's in here.
That's
That makes it difficult, I think, because they're basically sworn in for a 3-year period by the Board of Selectmen. They have enforcement powers, and
Okay.
I don't think an intern could or should be put in that position.
Understood.
So eliminate that then. That part, the intern part.
The intern part.
Yep. Okay.
So basically
Okay.
all of this.
Yeah. And the next recommendation I note is very similar. Develop a volunteer program to assist with increasing capacity for shellfish wardening and oversight during the peak season. I guess that's something less than enforcement. I don't know what those volunteers would do, but somebody must have had an idea about it.
Well, just random volunteer people can't do this.
I developed a volunteer program a couple of years ago when we had a big set in Mattocket for recreational season. And trained a couple people to stand out there and collect fishery data. That's probably where this came from.
Okay.
Incentivized, needing maybe community service hours. They were, younger high school kids that wanted to do it.
And sit outside in a chair.
Well, that seems like that would address something that Jeff was saying about, if someone's in Mattocket, the warden's in Mattocket. I mean, the volunteers wouldn't have enforcement, but they certainly could scatter about different landing areas and collect data.
They could collect data. They could, explain to people the difference between an adult and seed. And yeah, education. Most of it, I think it's a good idea, especially if it's younger people, to get them involved.
And take the word wardening out then. Wardening has a different capacity.
Yeah.
So education and oversight or data collection, that kind of thing.
Data collection is a big.
Education, yeah.
Yep. Good. Good. Recommendation 3, explore implementing a requirement for recreational shellfishers to submit catch data before applying for new permits in order to assist with assessing annual harvest amounts. That seems like a related idea and a good one. And then I guess this must be a reference in this comment to the application perhaps that David was talking about.
Yeah, I'm not sure this needs to be in here by itself as opposed to being put in with the one just in front of it.
Okay.
And somewhere you gotta work in public education.
Yeah.
And we have now 3 shellfish events. We had just had last weekend Scalapalooza, the end of the scalloping season at the brewery, and it was packed. And we've got Oyster Fest and we have the Scallopers Ball, and all of those are great opportunities for hopefully maybe somebody like the Shellfish Association to get the word out about this and about the app, and then make it a thing where the recreational scallopers take ownership and make them feel good about it.
Exactly.
My only concern about this recommendation is that, for the numbers that you compile to make any sense or draw any conclusions from, is gonna be based on who remembers what they, they did last season or whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're gonna get, I just don't think the numbers are gonna be particularly meaningful.
Yeah,
I think they're gonna be meaningful, because right now we have nothing. So if you get, for instance, at the Scalapalooza, people are like, oh yeah, I went 3 times last year. And I was like, did you get 3 full bushels? Yes. Okay, so we can use that. And one guy went and got his entire limit every single week. And I think that would add up to 2,000, 3,000 bushels. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be
Okay, well, I
something
mean,
that you could add.
you guys are working with the numbers. I mean, if you
Yeah.
get 20% response,
It's a different thing when you're a recreational person and when you're a commercial person. A commercial person, if you ask them to remember offhand how many bushels they got without their notes, if they took notes, whereas I can tell you in 2023, I got 3 bushels because I had a gold mine spot, and last year I got bad information and didn't get any. I got skunk to both locations, and I remember that. So I think people are gonna
Okay,
remember,
okay.
yeah.
Would you
And
wanna make
again,
Yeah.
you want them to get used to using the app. Once it gets developed, I think it'll be easier for them.
way to do it, yeah.
Then they just tag it in every time they go out, but is it a requirement to get a new license?
It used to be, it's not anymore.
Well, this says requirement.
I don't think they
I
asked.
don't think it's hard when you write your name and address down when it says estimated number of bushels harvested in the previous season, to write down 3. I don't think that's a big ask.
But it's realistic.
Okay, well, anyhow, you're the
Yep.
ones working the numbers, so.
Yep.
Steve, you had a couple of comments. The Marine Department went out on patrol, and then 1-page questionnaire on that one as well.
Yeah, I don't even remember what that was at this point.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Hey, I'm in the same boat.
It was so long ago I was making these notes.
Well, you're good to do it too. It's all, everybody appreciates it.
Okay, number 4.
For
So we're
share
gonna keep-
information, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, so we're keeping this as is. Anything to add about promoting the app, or is that just sort of something that'll happen separate from this process?
That
I
would
think
be
we
separate.
should,
Okay.
Because I think before we start talking about promoting the app, we should be sure it's getting developed.
Maybe we put development out.
yeah,
Well, that's not
Yeah.
4.
Well, Jeff, you're working on that though, right?
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
Daily.
4 is share information results on the town website following any tests on shellfish health and quality. I hope so.
You can add the app in there, can't you? Data collected by the app, et cetera, et cetera.
again, I don't want to limit it to specifically one thing. There may be a combination of things that are there, or in 8 years' time, we may be off the app and we may be onto
AI.
something totally different. Maybe we'll have smart pens that scan your catch for you. I don't know.
I'm still not gonna get a car I have to talk to.
You may not get that choice.
It's a car that talks to me.
Okay, we're on objective 5, recommendation 1. Maintain and continue to seek funding through grants, shellfish license fees, and fines to support fisheries development, management, and research. And Tara had a comment. Fishery service hours. Oh,
Nobody likes that idea. I've tried.
oh. You're backing away from it?
I mean, it was just a suggestion, but,
I think it opens a whole can of worms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other than that, any other comments? Seems straightforward. Recommendation 2, continue shellfish propagation through the Brant Point hatchery.
Most definitely.
I feel like that, at the end of it. It's good.
See what happens.
Number 3, identify areas in both Nantucket and Mattocket for implementation of rotational closures of shellfish beds for sensitive habitats, closed to dredging and push raking.
that's being done in the eelgrass management plan.
So we reinforce it here.
I think so.
Okay.
It's kind of a new idea out here,
Okay.
so I think it's good to introduce it as much as we can.
Good. Perfect. Number 4, explore opportunities for creating an aquatic habitat specialist position.
Isn't that you?
It is right now. But I think the whole eelgrass management plan and implementing it is gonna be a full-time job aside from shellfish, and I think that it would be good to keep this in here just as an idea for the future if we get involved in a lot of restoration type projects.
Obviously. I
Okay.
mean, we're water quality specialist. I think having someone that specializes in habitats is always a good idea to go with it.
Then why do we need opportunities? Why don't you say explore creation of an aquatic habitat specialist position, period?
I like it.
Yeah, I'm not want opportunities, I want to explore the creation of an aquatic habitat specialist position, period.
Leaves it vague and uncommitted.
Yeah, I don't, these opportunities, I don't care. Explore creating it.
Good. All right. Recommendation 5, identify types of fishery incentives for utilizing diver-based and other habitat-sensitive shellfish methods. Long comment here. Somebody want to pick that up? Pioneer
Yes,
season.
it's a nice idea, but you're gonna have a tough time with some of these guys that have been scalloping and are used to doing it the way they've been doing it forever, and the way they learned. I don't believe that you're gonna sway them over to stop using a dredge and go diving. If that's what this is trying to say.
I don't think you're gonna swim, but I think we're gonna start seeing some protection measures that come into play in certain areas of the harbor and. You know, not trying to convert people over, but if it's closed for protection, but we allow people to snorkel or dive for shellfish harvest, then that will be there. Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting way to try to engage new people into the fishery too.
Yeah.
To say if you're gonna come into the fishery and be new.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of
Maybe-
guys back in the day who used to go lobstering, diving around the jetties. And conking guys, they didn't dredge, they dove. As we dove for lobsters, but you know, and all the cribs is over there. But it's not just scalloping, there's all kinds of stuff they can dive for. And
I mean-
it isn't thought to sort of leave it in here, so there's something else here to promote.
Do we know?
To your
Comment
point, Jeff, if somebody were just starting out and they woke up one morning and said, I think I'm gonna go scalloping, I think that diving would probably be an easier way for them to get into the fishery than learning how to use a dredge.
And a boat and everything else.
I agree.
Who put the comment in? Does anybody know?
I have a question, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
I think maybe, I don't want to digress too far on this, but have we given any thought to, or have we had anybody apply for an apprenticeship as a diver?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that if we have, that's great, and that is offered as an alternative for spending time on a boat with a guy throwing dredges. So if that's the case, then that's good. Because again, that might get some young people more involved than we have now.
I think there's been one, but it's still more than zero.
Well, well, it's great. That's great then, but at least they have the alternative.
Tim Mooney was the teacher, right? Wasn't he?
Mhm.
You don't remember that?
Who?
Yeah.
Tim Mooney. He was the,
Retired Coast Guardsman.
Okay, so that in the red of that recommendation has a lot of thoughts in it. Should we bullet those, the ones that seem good and that you've talked about? Or, I mean, the recommendation itself very generally suggests these things, and the rest of it is detail, which we could then bullet if you'd like.
Might be a little bit more easier to understand if we bulleted them.
Okay, we'll do that.
That's just my idea.
Yeah. Okay. Recommendation 6, evaluate the potential for environmentally sensitive mooring technologies. Emily, I think, wanted to comment.
I'm trying to remember exactly what my comment is. Oh, there it is. So I think it's just was asking whether we could go beyond just recommending the evaluation of them and recommend that we actually adopt a plan to implement them.
I
Just
like
sort
that.
of a suggestion, rather than just exploring it, we actually add something in there that talks about doing it.
I totally agree, Emily. We've been talking about alternatives for 35 years that I know of, so we gotta move that off the dime.
Yeah.
So, Emily, what would the verb be then, rather than evaluate?
Implement.
Well, I would do evaluate and implement.
What about develop a phased approach for implementing
Yeah.
sensitive mooring technology, or is that too vague?
No,
I think that
probably.
works.
And this isn't gonna happen in every place, but in
No.
environmentally sensitive areas, then it should be implemented.
Yeah.
You know, there's
It
the
needs-
Dormore, there's the Helix, there's the expansion road, there's numerous technologies out there, and we just need to do it.
commit to try.
Yeah.
There are
Maybe-
certain places that a big mushroom does exactly what it's supposed to do, but they're not usually in, they're not in the mooring field. Let's put it that way. That's where they work the best. I know of communities that have gone to all Helix. They had 100-year storm and they lost 75% of their boats. So again, it's a phased approach in environmentally sensitive areas, which is the way it's worded, which I think works fine.
All right, good. Good comment, Emily. Recommendation 7, develop a resilience plan framework for the Brand Point hatchery by identifying alternative sites for the facility, methods of enhancing the resilience of the current location, and potential site for second hatchery on the west end. Somebody commented, wasn't this part of the resiliency plan? Was it not a priority? And I note that when the town administrator reviewed the plan, her only comment was it'd be a huge undertaking. I think she was referring to a second site.
Peter, was it considered in the coastal
believe it was.
resiliency plan?
It was part of the plan, but it should be in both places.
Okay,
It'd be here and there because, because Crack met with, Crack met with, Crack met with Shab. And I believe we met with this board as well to get how there was crossover. To make sure that everything that Crack felt should be included, so.
Well, the other thing too is it doesn't have to be a facility that is as extensive as the one you currently have. It could be a smaller facility. It could be an auxiliary, a backup, whatever you want to call it, but it certainly should be investigated.
Mhm.
As I recall, that location was somewhere on River Creek. Is that right?
We were looking at the place owned by the Marine Department on Hither Creek where the parking is, Dave.
Yep. Yeah, we own it. We own 2 big lots there. You're exactly right.
But
And
that's
if you built it up on stilts because it's
It's-
wet, it would certainly work.
We were talking more about like mobile hatchery units
Mm.
for the
Oh, I
future.
see. Yeah.
Those things.
That makes a lot more sense, because Concom's gonna have it.
It was a
That makes more
vulnerable
sense.
spot though.
Yeah.
I don't know what the state of Millie's Bridge will be.
One thing about Hither Creek is it's pretty protected. So, yeah, that's a good spot, Tara.
I would say the Concom issues are not what they seem to be.
Yes,
It's a water dependent use.
I know this.
Mhm.
Water dependent use.
As water dependent as you can get.
Peter, was it in the CRP? Because I don't feel like it was.
Okay, I'll have to go back.
So I can actually answer that. Is the town didn't do like a building by building breakdown of town facilities located in coastal areas. The plan itself is somewhat more general related to individual town facilities. But it does encourage the town to adapt all of their facilities as needed to minimize risk to the facility. It's a really long answer to that.
And so the space in Mattocket would be considered a place that the current hatchery would retreat to,
Potential.
if we're talking retreat.
Yeah, but isn't Mattocket considered more vulnerable or as vulnerable as Brant Point right now?
Well,
Mm.
yeah, but again, I don't think that changes the recommendation here. I mean,
Right.
we can,
And it has to be in terms of what land the town has to have such a facility, and if those are the only 2 lots, then unless the town wants to buy land.
I like the idea of the movable. I think that it makes much more sense in Mattocket.
Land bank has some nice property there too.
again, this is just to put together a plan and framework. We're not designing the project.
Fine.
Yeah, not yet.
Gives us the flexibility.
Yep. That's a good recommendation. Recommendation 8, improve shoreside docks and pier at Brant Point Hatchery to accommodate additional workboats, working platform, breakwater, etc. And Tara offered the comment that the work is design and permitting is in the works.
This year's capital plan. As long as it gets approved next month.
Okay.
3 times.
No, only 2.
No,
No, it's 2.
no, sure.
The one that gets projects approved, so. it's 2.
Okay, recommend improve. So if it ends up in the capital improvement plan, then this recommendation still reads all right. Would we want to say anything different?
No, I think.
Okay, it's fine. All right. Recommendation 9, continue to identify markets for alternative shellfish species, conduct planning to create support services for new industries to be successful. Comment, the market for new species do not have to be for human consumption. There could be a big market for rib mussels if they can help it with coastal resiliency.
I think markets, I wrote in my comment to the side, should be changed to advantages because we're a town entity. We're not really in the market for like
Yeah.
Hmm.
doing thing.
Yeah, you said exactly what I was gonna say. Markets, we, we're not in that business.
Yeah.
But continue to identify whatever Tara said,
Yeah, what did you say, Tara? It was good,
Um,
but I didn't write it down.
advantages.
Advantages, yep.
Said, hmm. I mean, in my side comment, it just says continue to explore advantages or ecosystem services for exploring other species native to Nantucket for coastal resiliency projects. Water quality improvement or other markets, which maybe you don't need markets in there,
Gotcha.
other
Yeah.
uses.
Okay, so bring over that comment. Okay. Anything else on that one? All right, objective 6, recommendation 1. Oops, sorry.
Oh, no, just wanted to clarify, do we want to keep the second part of the sentence on that recommendation? I think we're saying.
I think Tara's comment on the right probably is how we'll go with that.
Okay, so not keeping the seconds.
Yeah. Objective 6, what kind of recommendations are happening? I don't know what this one is myself here. Tara, need a better way to obtain.
Hey, Tara,
Yes.
I don't know. Do you feel that it's important to try to explain even briefly in here about how rib mussels help with coastal resiliency? Or we just leave it and we'll explain it later when we have to do it?
Didn't we already cover this
I think,
above here somewhere?
I think if we say alternative shellfish species. Or maybe non-commercial shellfish species, that kind of covers everything.
Okay, okay, all right,
Yeah.
all right.
Without listing it specifically.
Didn't we already
Right.
talk about?
I mean, if
Yeah.
anybody's ever seen those rib mussel beds like in Pulpus and around Pulpus and the shoreline, you know, it's quite evident that that's what's holding that shoreline in place.
Yeah.
We want this to say non-commercial
Mm-hmm.
species native to Nantucket.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Objective 6, enhance documentation of commercial and recreational shellfish activity. And then I don't think there was a recommendation here. I
Didn't we
think
already do this up
yeah,
higher?
it does sound like we already did this.
Why is this in here?
I don't know.
We already dealt with it higher up. We're talking about the app and everything else up there.
Yeah. Everybody feel the same way?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we
Yeah.
can get rid of it then.
Drop it.
Drop it.
We can get rid of redundancy is good.
For sure. All right, next section is commercial waterfronts. We've done the goals and objectives already. So recommendation 1 under objective 1, continue to conscientiously apply the standards of the Harbor Overlay District regulations to advance the district's objectives of protecting and expanding water-dependent uses and facilities to maintain and strengthen the harbor's maritime tradition, and then prioritize the uses most in need among those listed in 139.12 I3F. This one, the plan in 2007 did a lot, created the Harbor Overlay District and these standards for encouraging and maintaining water-dependent uses. So all we're saying here is just be on top of that. Make sure that whoever's implementing the regulatory reviews in the Harbor Overlay District continue to follow what that guidance is. The only other comment I have on it, in that reference to prioritizing the water dependent uses listed in that section, it's a long list and it's not, in a sense, prioritized in any way. And we've talked during this process of the need for a chandlery and perhaps a couple of other types of things. I don't know if there was a way that this plan wants to suggest that there is, in fact, a priority among those uses. But that's the only thing I could think to add to this.
Well, I I think it was so important to do the harbor overlay district and whatever strong words we can use to make sure that gets implemented or preserved or enforced. I don't know about the prioritization part.
Yeah. That's a little tougher too, because we were talking about how do you get somebody to do a chandlery if they don't believe that that's something that they're interested in doing.
Well, I believe that by saying prioritize, I think you should take the word, it should say prioritize and say it in a sense of need.
I see. So,
In other words, give preference to those things that are needed.
What if you change the word prioritize to incentivize?
Yeah.
and maybe take that a little bit further and make sure that that the planning board is aware that this is something that we need, so that when that comes up, or the opportunity for that to comes up, that they prioritize.
Right. Right. For instance, the Chapter 91 permit for 34 Washington Street for Brant Point Marine is a chandlery.
Mhm.
So, and I currently don't know what the building is being used for right now, but
Ryan Mitchell moved their thing in there.
5 years.
Yeah.
4 years.
Ryan Mitchell's in there with the tanks and stuff like that.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Ryan Mitchell's in there when they got rid of the train trestle building next door, moved it across the street. Ryan Mitchell moved all of their water related tanks and stuff in there.
Oh, I see. I didn't know that.
But
Okay.
definitely, which we don't have here.
Any other comments on that one?
So there was
the
a piece
next-
about communicating that to the planning board or the planning department.
Yeah, the next recommendation may get at that.
Okay.
Require that all permit applications for new development, redevelopment, or change in use of priorities in the Harbor Overlay District be forwarded to the Harbor Plan Implementation Committee for an advisory opinion. Someone asked the question, would this in fact be advisory or would have any teeth? And the answer to that is it would be advisory to the review, to the regulatory entity.
I would say that Shab needs to be there. We're also an advisory board. However, if somebody can't, if it was a requirement for them to run what they want to do by the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board, I would trust that our board would get it done appropriately.
Mhm.
Or deny it if it's not appropriate. So I think
Planning board cannot defer, nor can the ZBA. Neither one of those permit granting authorities under 40A can defer action to another board, period. What
So,
does happen though, when you have an MCD type of situation,
so I
is that
would,
they have to ship it out to everybody for comment. They have
Mhm.
no regulatory authority in a planning board or a ZBA decision.
I would say it would be a little bit more grassroots. So when that pier was proposed at the Concom for Shimo, nobody reached out to us, but we heard about it. So we as a board decided to write a letter condemning it, sending it to the Concom. So there's no way that something isn't gonna get proposed, something's gonna get proposed that has implications and impacts on the harbor and the marine life that we're not gonna hear about it and be able to say something about it.
I think the wording should be HOD be forwarded to the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board.
Okay.
And Harbor Plan Implementation Committee if you want, but I think that Shab ought to be right there.
For
I don't
comment, for comment only.
Well, that's fine. The comment would be to the selectmen telling them we don't want the people to do whatever they're trying to do.
That's all we can do is comment. We're
Yeah,
advising.
that's-
Exactly.
No one
To
can
say,
tell
"Hey,
them what
we
to
think
do
you
under
should
the law. That's
Not
the
do
problem.
this, or
Yep, the recommendations as an advisory opinion.
When they do make MCD opinions, we have to send it out to 17 different people.
Yeah.
Now, so there's no reason why we can't ask them and how we want to phrase it to make sure that these other entities are given
No,
an
Peter-
opportunity to comment.
Peter's exactly right. There's not gonna be anything that happens that we're, by hook or by crook, we're not gonna have an opportunity to comment.
Yeah, but I think they should be forwarded to those entities, which makes it a little bit more, gives it more teeth for
Oh, I
comment.
see. I see. Okay.
So I-
Anybody, any board sees it, but it would be good if in our regulations or our recommendations that we state clearly that when an issue were pertaining to the waterfront, the harbors, yada, 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 gets forwarded to those entities, list the entities
Right.
for comment.
I like
That's what-
that.
So there's no question that they shouldn't be given an opportunity, so they don't have to find out about it in the paper or on Wisconsin Gazette.
So I have a quick question. What does constitute redevelopment? If somebody wants to reshingle their house and they have to get a shingling permit, does that mean that they have to go, that they have to wait for an opinion from SHAB? And
They don't go to the planning board or the zoning board for that. That is repair or replacement. That has nothing to do.
It's
Right.
use. It's use, Steve.
Okay, thank you.
so Steve, redevelopment is what's happening across the street from where we are, where the Downy Flake is.
Well,
And they remove something and and want to put something else there, or they take a building and gut it, and that's it's much more major than
So
reshingling.
that's gonna include residential properties. all in,
I'm not.
Harbor over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It
I
was
think
good.
that a change of a residential property would be one of the prime things you'd want to be looking at. Now, I noticed that in the zoning bylaw where there are these other referrals to other boards, that there's a 35-day comment period. And if the comment isn't received within that period of time, then the assumption is that the referral agency didn't have any comments.
Emily?
And I don't
Hold
know
on.
if that's statutory or that's put in, but it sounds to me like it's statutory.
Emily,
Yeah, thanks. I just noticed that Kim has that I had a comment for this one and it
Mhm.
was, I think it's addressed now. My question was just, will there always be a harbor plan implementation committee? And should we be referring to a more longstanding board or department? So
I think that's right. Yeah, so since there is no harbor plan implementation committee, this would assume that one's going to be created. And I suppose if it's not, then there's a hole there. So I think the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board reference is a good one.
or an appropriate entity.
Yeah, I mean, at some point there'll have to be a bylaw amendment that inserts this, so. Although they
Yeah.
could see it in a plan and say, all right, we'll do that.
No, they're not gonna read the plan. We've got to put it into the bylaw so they have it notated right there.
Oh, I agree with you. All right. Anything else on that one? Next one is support implementation of the Nantucket Historic District Commission's Historic Properties Survey Plan, which gives high priority to the need for surveys in a number of neighborhoods that intersect with the harbor planning area. So that's what that's
They are undertaking all of this already, at least in the town ROH that borders the harbor. They're redoing these in there. I don't know what this 2002 thing is. The survey forms are from 1989. And they are now doing surveys of most of the areas that cover the waterfront and going up into almost all the way up to Pleasant Street for the fish lots. So there is a lot of this taking place now through grants and other funding from particularly CPC that I'm on.
Okay.
And they're going to do it now anyway.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to phrase this one.
Well, we could, all it says is support implementation, so they're doing it, so I don't know what, originally when this was written, they weren't doing it. And because I talked to the historic officer and she said that that's what they wanted to do. So now the fact that they're doing it now is a good thing.
I don't know where 2002 came from.
That's their plan. So they have a plan from 2002 that lays all this out. And which
1989.
right. So the surveys that they had completed at that time had been done in 89 and they wanted to, to do new ones.
That's what they're doing right now, but that's why I'm questioning the 2002 date. I don't know what that is.
I think they got that from Holly, so.
Yeah, it's news. Oh, it's German.
Okay, so we could leave that because it just says support implementation, so no harm, no foul, unless it's already done and there's no need to say this any longer.
Ongoing.
Okay. Okay, support ongoing implementation, okay. Okay, this next one I put in an explanatory note. You might recall that years ago, when we started this, we talked about this recommendation from the 2007 plan that talked about identifying scenic views of the harbor landscape and waterscape to guide decision-making on potential impacts to visual access. I believe my recollection is the committee said, we don't need to do that. And I looked into it and I saw, if you read my comments there in blue, it talks about the fact that the authorities exist for any of the reviews that are going on, that they will take into account unique, natural, scenic, and historic features of the site and minimizing obstruction to scenic views where applicable. That's for all site plan reviews and other major reviews. So it's done. I mean, if one, in my experience, they generally don't do that, but even though that it says that they could do that because it's one of among 10 or 12 things that they're supposed to be doing. So all we're saying is that, and this would require somebody to do this, is to identify either views that the community would very much like not to have interfered with in advance, or the characteristics of those views in order to provide guidance to those regulatory reviews. I don't know if you want to reconsider this recommendation or not. It's up to you.
Not getting done.
Yeah.
Concom already did it and they shouldn't have. I wasn't sitting on it because my client that's opposing it. That approved 130 feet straight across the creeks that blocked an entire view of Millie's and the head of the creeks. Nobody's paying any attention to the scenic views. And I remember years ago when I was working at the ZBA across the hall from the Concom at 37 Washington Street, we would have this discussion about preserving scenic views all the time. Nobody's paying any damn attention to it. Not the HDC, not the Concom, nobody. Certainly the planning board doesn't take that into account because it's not within their jurisdiction, either there's the ZBA. But the people that aren't supposed to be taking this into account are not. So I'm having a problem with them not doing this. And so we're losing scenic views right and left, especially along Mattocket Harbor in this one instance. So I'm not exactly sure where to go with this because nothing irritates me more than losing the scenic views. And I remember.
Linda, who is responsible to do this?
I thought the Concom had this in our jurisdiction, don't we?
Oh, I didn't know. I was hoping you knew who was supposed to be doing it.
Wetland scenic views is an interest of the wetlands bylaw. But there's some caveats to that as well. It's
What are
not
the
like,
caveats?
well, it's the view from a public way
Yeah,
of those resource areas, but you can't limit a use or something strictly on wetlands view. Like if someone wanted to build a house outside of, the jurisdictional boundaries correctly, and it's gonna block a public view from the way, you can't really tell them they can't build a house.
well, then we don't have any jurisdiction over blocking scenic views.
You do under the zoning bylaw, that section 13923E that I point out in the comment is the site
Yeah.
plan review section for all review authorities for site plan review and special permits shall, among other criteria, consider the protection of these views.
That's all they seek a special permit from the ZBA or the planning board, which most of these don't, because they don't violate setbacks or zoning or ground cover or height or any of that other stuff. They block an entire view of Millie's, the bridge, the wetlands across the harbor and the whole front of the harbor, the whole south end of the Mattocket Creeks, the whole view, 130 straight feet.
And they did that without site plan review?
Well, they didn't need ZBA or a planning board. They just needed to go to the Concom and they rolled over and gave them what they wanted.
Well, then, there's not much you're gonna be able to do about it then.
Yes,
Other than this plan, the plan could at least highlight this.
Wetland scenic views are a little bit of a,
Catch 22, yeah.
the case law around wetland scenic views isn't good to try to deny or restrict uses that are otherwise compliant by potentially harming the view. Because what's a scenic view is 1,000,000% subjective. And how much do you need for the scenic view, right? And that's been the problem with this all along for this interest, and it's the problem that DEP has dealt with, where if looking through a corridor that's 10 feet wide where you can see the view is enough, well, that's someone's opinion and that's enough. It may not be enough for me. But that's the problem, is it's a completely subjective metric, and when challenged, never won. Because it's subjective.
That's what concerns me, is that
Well, that's what, I
there's
mean,
an entire scenic view of 130 feet of Mattocket Creeks that's blocked completely from view. And you got no view after that because of where the other house is. It's been there for,
Well, how many
80
people care
years.
about that?
well, they're all up in arms in Mattocket, I can tell you that, but the
well, they
Concom
should
gave
have,
it to them and that
they
was
should have
it.
participated. I don't know what to tell you, but I can tell you that the case law around that is not good.
I would agree, Jeff, on Concom review, but I don't think that applies to zoning board review.
Only if you go for a special permit, which they don't 90% of the time need a special permit or any type of thing from the planning board because they meet all the requirements. So no, they don't have any jurisdiction 99.9% of the time. That's a problem.
That's a problem.
Yeah, well, then there's nothing you can do about it then.
No.
There's no jurisdiction.
Well, that's a shame because then we just lost 130 feet of Mattocket Harbor.
We'll take our,
That's,
we could have silver lots and it'll all get washed away and you'll have the view again.
It's up high enough.
no, I agree with you, Linda. That's a shame, but what about, my point is, what about the next one?
We're gonna keep losing
That's a shame that we have no teeth there.
Washington because you can't block the view there, but the creeks are under siege out there.
Well, I mean, the recommendation says identify scenic views or characteristics of scenic views of the harbor landscape and waterscape to guide decision-making on potential impacts to visual access. If this were to be done, if somebody were to carry out such a survey, and then that's your basis for making a comment when you have the opportunity to make a comment.
So should we leave the recommendation in there?
I would, at least it puts it on the record.
I totally agree.
Yeah, and it was in I don't remember if it was these words or not, but there was a recommendation in the last plan about it.
And then bullet the reference to section 13923E. So that's also in there.
We could certainly keep that, sure.
That's there.
Yep.
Yeah, most definitely. I like the way it's worded. At least it gives some clarification.
Yeah. Some reference to the authority anyway, in case somebody
Right,
wants to.
right.
Good, very good. Objective 2, this one, This one, let's see if we have enough time for this one. This one says amend 13922C of the zoning bylaw to include a prohibition on conversion of existing docks to an appurtenance to residential uses, including transient residential facilities in the Harbor Overlay District. Emily and Phil both said they wanted to talk about this one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I defer to Emily.
Well, well, go ahead, Emily.
I'm gonna have to look
Emily?
back at my notes to see exactly what I had wanted to say about this, but I think I just wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to chat about it.
Yep.
Mhm.
This stems purely from somewhere along the line, I think either a public comment or the committee itself talked about a residence that had, no, I don't know, was some structure that had been converted to a residence and there was an existing dock. And they were renting the residence, maybe multiple units, along with the dock. And that would not be allowed typically. But if I looked at the regulations and they, a commercial, a transient residential facility is a commercial use according to your bylaw. So
As far as the prohibition of construction of new or expansion of existing private docks, I got no reason to ever change
right,
that,
right.
but I don't understand this new resident.
It-
Peter,
it-
are
It
you?
came because
are
of
you
that issue,
familiar
David.
with Where I've never heard of the scenario that you gave, Jack, unless
Okay.
So what Jack is referring to is, I think, is what Rachel Freeman was trying to get clarification on. What was Harborview Place was purchased by the Frisbees.
Yeah.
And they have since put one of those buildings high enough up. And it was a commercial entity before, right? It was condos,
It was mixed use.
mixed use, and they were somehow saying that there was a dock there. And so then can they now be grandfathered to put that dock there? I think that's what
Yeah,
Jack was referring to.
that sounds right, Peter.
where is it, Peter? I'm sorry.
Right, it's literally right next to where the Mariah Mitchell Aquarium was. It's that little.
In that corner?
It's the
Yeah.
old Red Anchor building.
Before you get to the commercial commercial wharf intersection, there's an old building there for the last.
It's 26
150.
Washington Street,
It's
Dave.
before you get there, right after you go past where Mariah Mitchell was, and the next building past, the Chambering or whatever they had called.
But I don't ever
Woodlands
remember a
building.
dock there.
Uh,
Maybe,
there- There was a dock there in the 20s that they used to, that's where the, I know, I'm sorry. It's where the Argonaut was built, but that's neither here nor there. The answer to whether you could do that there is no,
yeah, because it's now residential. Because
exactly.
they,
And I guess what they were saying, somebody was saying that they were renting those residential units out, which would make it a transient residential facility, which is defined as a commercial use in your zoning bylaw.
yeah,
So
they
they,
definitely,
so they could build the dock, Jack?
Well, that's what they were saying.
But it had been a strictly a residential use between the time the dock went away and when it became a rental unit.
Exactly.
So
No.
the
The question
grandfathering
is
would have
if
gone away.
if the use technically becomes commercial, can that dock then be considered?
First of all, you'd have to dredge an awful lot to get to deep water to put any type of boat there. But
I'm having an issue with putting something in that's basically targeting one piece of property at the moment. And I
yeah,
don't think,
and
because
definitely.
we have the requirement for, water related uses on new structures and things like that. I think this needs to come out.
Okay.
if the two needs to come out. Or do you mean the recommendation below
The
it,
recommendation.
right?
Yeah,
So I would- like,
objective 2 needs to stay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
And with the comment that it needs to continue to be enforced.
Yeah, but the recommendation's gotta go.
Okay. I don't disagree with that. It's there because it was an issue during the planning process. It came up, so we addressed it. Do you want, it's 2:30 now. Do you want to stop or go?
I need
Yeah, we're
to
not-
get moving on.
I'm
We're
gonna
not
have to
gonna get
jump off.
Well, we've got, 1, 2, 3, 5 recommendations.
I need to drop out, everyone. I've got another appointment to get to.
Oh,
I have to go
Yeah.
too, I'm afraid.
Okay.
That's the answer to that question.
Oh, that answers that, question.
So
when-
Linda, next meeting,
2 weeks.
which is what?
whatever you'd like it to be. 2 weeks from now is the 28th.
28th.
The last year's Memorial Day.
Maybe everybody's attitude will be better because it won't be tax day.
Good point.
That's tomorrow. Okay, somebody want to make a motion to adjourn at 2:33?
So moved.
Phil made a motion to adjourn at 2:33. Is there a second?
Second,
Peter seconded. All those in favor? Peter,
aye.
Phil,
Aye.
Steve,
Bye.
Dave,
Aye.
Emily.
Bye.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Linda.
Disconnect.
Well,